Welcome in. I am here today on assignment with a message that I feel very called to share with you. And I really believe you're not seeing this by accident, but this video and this message is reaching you right on time. We're going to talk today about the spiritual secret for thriving in any economy, even in a recession. The spiritual secret for thriving in any economy, really any set of circumstances, but yes, even in a recession. And so welcome into a very special edition of the Stephen Lovegrove Show. My core message over the years has always been the same, and that is all things are possible for the one who believes. And I am here to help you be the one who believes. Take a second, if you will, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications. It's a powerful and easy way for you to instantaneously tell the algorithm, I want more of this energy, this work, this message in my life. But again, all things are possible for the one who believes. And today, together, we are going to step into some new beliefs that open up new possibilities for you. You know, it really is true. Your belief system is creating your whole life. Jesus said it best when he said, you become what you believe. Your belief system is creating your whole life. And so what that means is you will never be able to experience something new until you choose to believe something new. You will never be able to experience something new until you choose to believe something new. And of course, what that means is we can't wait until we see it to believe that it is true, to believe that it is real, to believe that it is possible. We have to make a decision within ourselves when we don't yet have the evidence to believe something new. But if we're willing to do that, if we're willing to believe something new, we can step into a new reality, a new experience, a new possibility starting today. And by the way, let me just say, because I heard this truth come through the other day while I was journaling. A teacher, a guide, a mentor can never impart to you a belief system that they don't personally hold. A teacher, a guide, a mentor can never impart to you a belief system that they don't personally hold. You know, a lot of the beliefs that I have been talking about and teaching about, even here on YouTube recently, with prosperity and overflow and giving, etc. There's a lot of people out there that can't, in integrity or authenticity, teach this stuff because they haven't experienced it. And they don't practice it. And at a core level, they don't actually believe it. They might like the idea of it. They might like the concept or the words or the energies of it. But somebody can only impart to you something that they truly believe themselves. Something that they have truly practiced and lived and embodied themselves. And I will tell you, everything that I'm about to share with you today, it is what I live, it is what I believe in every cell of my being, and it is something that I know will change your life forever if you receive it. So, this is a divinely inspired message for you in this global moment. Now, I'll be upfront. I am not going to tell you today exactly what to do with your business or your career or your company. This video is not legal or financial or investment advice. I'm not going to tell you what ads to run or who to hire or what strategy to employ. It's not that kind of video. But this is a spiritual message speaking to the invisible realm, the energetic realm, the deepest level of reality for all of us who know that to be the case, coming from timeless, universal law and principle. If your mind and heart are open to receive that today, then let's go. LFG family, let's go and let's get into the spiritual secret to thriving in any economy. So I want to teach today from a story, and it's interesting. It's a Sunday school story that I remember hearing in church years and years ago as a little kid, right? But I'll be honest with you, it never really made a strong impression on me then. In fact, for 30 years of life, I've really never thought a lot about this story at all. That is until the last week, when I felt like God brought this story to my attention and said, there is something for you here. And there is something for your clients and your partners and your community here. And there is something that you are meant to lean into and to receive and then to teach here. And so I just want you to know I have received to the point of overflowing in my soul with this story over the past week, and I really believe there's something here for you to receive as well. It is a story that comes from the ancient Hebrew text of Genesis, which literally means the story of beginnings. This is an ancient text that establishes eternal principles that have always existed within and even beyond space and time. You know, I think there's something very important in this moment about rooting ourselves in eternal spiritual principle. When it feels like so much is in transition, when it feels like so much is changing, when it feels like so much is unknown, and maybe you feel that way personally today, and maybe you feel that way when you look around at the world in this moment, I feel it is extra crucial in a moment like this to anchor ourselves in eternal spiritual principle. You know, when the world shut down in March 2020, the most important message I was given, really that entire year, came from my coach at the time, Danielle Randall, that week. And she said to me, what has always been true continues to be true now. What has always been true continues to be true now. She also said, if I can add on to this, what has never been true is still not true now. There's a power in that as well. But I really believe, well, so many people out there are looking for the next trend. Many of us are realizing, I need something more reliable than this. I need something a little bit deeper than this. I need something a little more solid than this. And maybe you're here watching this teaching today and you recognize, I don't just need a trend. I need a truth on a spiritual level. And that's what we're going to receive from this ancient text today. I want to teach you from a story about famine. And again, it's wild to me that for decades of life, this story never had any significance to me until this last week. And then I saw something new and I just started hearing and receiving and downloading all of these insights, all of these aha moments. And it opened up a whole new world for me that I knew I had to share with you. This is a story about famine, and if you want to have a reference point, I'm going to be reading in various points in the teaching today from the scriptural text of Genesis 26. You can look it up anywhere online in the Hebrew Bible, Genesis 26. But it says in that text that a severe famine now struck the land, as had happened before in Abraham's time. A severe famine now struck the land, as had happened before in Abraham's time. Now, after studying this significantly, I actually believe there is nothing more relevant that we could possibly learn from in terms of ancient principle than something that happened during a famine. And I will unpack that more in a moment. I will explain why in a moment. But just know right off the bat here, the parallels are astounding. Anything that we read that takes place in the setting of a famine, we are talking about the ancient cultural equivalent of a recession. It is a direct parallel, and again, I'll say more about that in a moment, but can we notice here, a severe famine now struck the land, as had happened before in a previous generation. Can we recognize the truth in even just the setting of this story here, that famine comes around periodically in the external world? It just does. Famine comes around periodically in the external world. There are ups, there are downs, there are fluctuations. It happens in any country, in any economy, in any business, by the way. I have been so passionate about telling my clients, reminding my clients over the years that I don't care who it is. I don't care how much money they've made or how much you look up to them. There is nobody out there whose trajectory of numbers is only ever up and up and up and up. And they've never had a down month. And they've never had it decrease. And they've never had it fluctuate. There is nobody out there who doesn't have the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs of the human experience. And I find something reassuring about knowing this has happened before and people got through it, right? And this is important to remember because you might be in an experience right now, personally or collectively or both, where you truly feel like, to use the buzzword of the last several years, you truly feel like I am living in an unprecedented time. Steph and I have never experienced this before. I have never been through this. I have never had this issue, had this challenge, had this situation in my life before. And I understand that may be the case. But let's recognize this phenomenon that sometimes it feels like you're in famine is a universal part of the human experience. I find something about this reassuring, right? Because I will be honest with you. At the time of this recording, in a moment in our worlds where everybody is talking about recession, I will admit, this is my first time running a business, leading an organization, and moving through a recession. It's not the first one I've lived through, and it's obviously not the first one that's happened in recent history, but it is the first time that I have been in business moving through one. Maybe that's the case for you as well, or maybe for whatever set of reasons, whatever set of circumstances you find yourself in, this is the first time you feel like you've ever been here. What does it mean? What do we make it mean? What do we do with a famine in the external world? Now, I really studied this and got deep into this and fascinated by it as I was preparing this training for you because, again, like I said, the parallels of famine and recession are so striking because you've got to think about, we're reading about a famine that happens in an agricultural society. So this is their livelihood. This is their provision. This is their currency, right? And there was no alternate to it. There was no cryptocurrency that was going to step in and try to save the day. This was it, right? And so for an agricultural society, famine was like the worst crisis of all. The worst news you could possibly receive. The worst situation you could possibly be in. And I know that this might sound dark and heavy and depressing, and obviously, you know if you know me, this is going to be a message of hope and faith and empowerment. So stick with me. But I need you to understand this text and this story and the principles that it teaches are so relevant to us today. Because when an ancient agricultural society experienced famine, that was worse than a recession for them. That was them being on the brink of a collapse. And you don't have to take my word for it, okay? I got this quote just to show you how serious the stakes really were at this time. A Yale historian wrote, nearly all ancient civilizations almost collapsed at this specific point in history because of a prolonged drought. Nearly all ancient civilization literally almost collapsed because of a famine. Do you see what I mean about the parallels? It's actually probably a little bit worse than a recession, maybe even worse than a depression in the economy. What we're talking about here, we're talking about a supply being cut off, being ruined, being destroyed, and a civilization on the brink of collapse. And again, I know that's intense, but I want you to know, no matter how intense what you are facing in your life, in your business, in your circumstances today, no matter how intense it appears, this message is for you. This is relevant to you, and this will work for you. And I think this is important to acknowledge. The setting of this story is crucial here because the authors of this text want us to hear a divine message that is especially relevant when we're up against an overwhelming circumstance. I wrote this down in my notes as I was praying over this and getting ready this week. You know, there's a lot of personal development teaching out there that wants people to have the mindset of, the world is better than you think. It's actually all getting better. You just can't tune into the negative. Just don't watch the news. It's just a mindset thing. And hear me very clearly on this. I do believe there are aspects of that that are true. I do believe that there are examples we could find in many realms of where civilization is in a better situation today, more privileged, more fortunate, more wealthy than we ever have been before, right? I believe that there is evidence of that, and there are examples of that. I believe that there are examples of where we are progressing, we are moving forward, we are getting better as a civilization. And I do believe it is important to pay attention to the inputs we take in. I don't believe that the news is an accurate reflector of the world today. I don't believe Twitter is an accurate reflector of the world today, right? So there's aspects of truth to all of that. But I also value intellectual honesty, right? The only reason I can practice my spirituality in a real and sincere and meaningful way is because I'm always willing to be intellectually honest, and I feel like my clients, my audience appreciates that. And so can we just acknowledge, it is true that some things are getting better, have come a long way, are improving, and it is also true. There are things that are scary. There are things that feel out of control, maybe in your life, certainly in our world. There are things that it feels like and looks like they are in fact getting worse, that we have reverted in some way, that it is not going well, or improving? And what is the spiritual foundation that we stand on then? It's important to me to have a message that actually can speak to those moments, that still applies in those moments, that still works in those moments. And I really felt called to say right here, please hear this. Whatever the famine is that you may feel like you're in the middle of today, whatever it is that you're facing, whatever it is that you're nervous about, looming ahead in the future, please hear this. This is not the end. This is not the end. You know, this ancient civilization thought it was the end when they ended up in this severe of a famine. They looked around and all they could see was crisis and threats and lack and scarcity and destruction and devastation and everything seemingly getting worse. They looked around and they thought it was the end. They literally thought this might be the end of civilization as we know it, but they made it. They made it. And then there was more on the other side. And then it got better than they ever imagined. And things evolved and things progressed and things continued and things expanded and they made it. And I want somebody watching or listening to this to hear today, you are going to make it. And I see you on the other side of whatever you might be going through. And this is not the end. Please don't give up. Please don't throw in the towel. Please don't cut your story, your journey short. This is not the end. And I believe in moments of any form of famine that we could possibly experience, it's extra important in these moments that we remember the metaphysical principle. We are called to be in the world, but not of it. Let's talk about that for a moment. In the world, but not of it. See, in the religious environment that I grew up in, the way they taught that is, we can't dance, we can't listen to the music on the radio, we can't go to movie theaters. There were all of these silly rules. It was kind of like Beaumont in Footloose, and that is what they taught us, was the meaning of be in the world, but not of it, right? But that's silly. And clearly, it's something more than that. It's something deeper than that. I believe in the world, not of it, is a metaphysical principle. I believe in the world, not of it means you are meant to be living in the external realm, in your body, in your life, having a human experience, not running from your life, not running from your circumstances. You are meant to be having a real, live, dynamic human experience fully in the external world, fully in your body, fully in your life, right? But just because you're in the world doesn't mean you are of the world, right? The external realm is not your source, and it's not the deepest reality of who you are, and it's not where you came from. And you are connected to an invisible power and presence and love that sparked you into being, and it is your source, and it is your guide, and it is your friend, and you are in the world, but you are not of it, which means the external world might be your environment. It might be your setting, but it is not your creator, and it is not your cause. The external world might be your setting, but it is not your creator, and it is not your cause. You get to have your own experience. And when it comes to this topic, I suggest you get an agreement with this and affirm this. I get to live in my own economy. Somebody type that out in the comments. I get to have my own experience. I get to live in my own economy. And so the truth I want you to see today is it doesn't matter what's going on out there, you still get to remember who you are. You still get to keep creating. You still get to remain at cause. You still get to choose what happens in your reality. You still get to stay in your power. That's what it means to me, to be in the world, but not of it. And some of you might be like, I can't believe we spent so much time at the beginning of this training talking about famine, talking about externals, talking about a negative, talking about what's going on out there. But I felt called to do it in this way because what I heard God saying was, there's a lot of people who have been so afraid, so stressed, so scared, so uncertain, so unsure because of everything they see happening out there, that it has disconnected them from their power, from their soul, from their truest self. And they need a reminder in this moment that you are in the world, but not of it. And for the sake of your mind, for the sake of your subconscious, for the sake of your nervous system, I believe some of you needed an acknowledgement that, you know what? There is some unknown. There is some dark stuff out there. That there is some stuff that is scary. And yet, you get to have your own experience. What is going on out there does not have to dictate who you choose to be, how you choose to show up, or what you choose to create right now. Think about that. No set of circumstances, no one and nothing external gets to determine who you choose to be, how you choose to show up, what you choose to create. The last thing I want to say here is, I believe we needed to talk about the energy of famine at the beginning of this story because God actually has a message for his children about moments of famine. See, what I learned is in ancient Hebrew culture, there was a collective meaning assigned to famine. We talk a lot in the coaching world about what are you going to make that mean, right? And be careful the meaning you choose, and don't be too quick to assign a meaning to something. We talk a lot about meaning. But hear this, in this culture where famine literally felt like the worst possible thing that could happen, that was outside of your control, that could even destroy all of civilization, they had a collective meaning assigned to famine. See, in the ancient culture, they assumed there was a direct connection between weather and the gods. Whatever the religion, whatever the nationality, whatever the belief system was, you find this across the board in this realm of ancient culture. People assumed there was a direct connection between the weather and the gods. So in this culture in particular, we literally have record of this. We have writings that indicate this, that there was a collective assumption that famine meant people were under a curse, that famine meant that people had done something wrong, that God was causing them to suffer, that God was angry, that God was punishing them. And you can hear that resulted in such a heavy, high stakes intensity around what it meant to be in a famine. Because if you believe that, that means when you find yourself in a famine, it means you might be under a curse. It means you might have done something wrong or messed it up. It means you might have missed your chance. It means you might have lost favor with God. It means that you're going to have to go without. It means that you and everybody else are going to have to suffer. It means that things are going to get a lot worse. And I wanted to vocalize all of that because beyond just the burden of what are we going to do about this famine, you can hear the burden that would create on people moving through this experience. And I believe there are many of you watching and listening to this today, and you're going through a situation, you're going through something in your circumstances, you're going through a transition, and the situation itself may have one level of burden that you have been carrying. But then you've taken on even more than that, because you've taken on the burden of what you think it means. And so you wonder if you're being punished for something. You wonder if the universe is teaching you a lesson. You wonder if God has you stuck in a holding pattern. You wonder what kind of awful karma is in the mix to be creating this for you. You wonder if somebody else's decisions are going to affect you and there's nothing you can do about it. You wonder if you were born at the wrong time. You wonder if we're all just screwed. Whatever it is, I believe there are people out there who have been in some dark places mentally, wondering what it means that you feel like you're in a famine and you're still there. And I want you to hear, because as we're going to find out in this story, God makes it abundantly clear that is not the correct or the true interpretation in this moment. Some of you, I believe today, can free yourself from and release yourself from and simply let go of a story you've been carrying in a difficult season. As you hear this divine message for you today, arriving right on time, that's not what this is about. That's not what it means. And that is not the correct or the true interpretation of what is going on. See, God's going to talk to his child in this story. We're going to read it in a moment. And what we're going to discover is God did not want him to take on the meaning, the story, the belief that he was being cursed. In fact, as we're going to find out as we read further, the message of God was actually the exact opposite. And so I want you to hear today, it doesn't mean what you think it means. And you didn't do anything wrong. And you can let go of the guilt. And you can forgive yourself. And you can stop punishing yourself. And you can stop judging yourself. And you can stop being your worst critic today. It doesn't mean what you think it means. Now, before we read what God says to his child in this story, I want to talk about what our main character here, whose name is Isaac, I want to talk about what Isaac thinks he should do in a famine, right? And I think this is so important to see, because what Isaac thought was going to save him, was going to help him, was going to move him forward in this time, it is really, I believe, what so many of you out there have in one form or another been trying to do. And I believe that many of us are going to see ourselves and our lives in this story. So as we continue reading, we see Isaac considers that maybe he should go to Egypt during this famine. Because of this famine, as a solution in this famine, Isaac thinks maybe he should go to Egypt. Now, what is the significance of Egypt here? It has nothing to do with the country, the nationality, the people itself. There's a metaphysical meaning here. There's a spiritual meaning here in the story. And the meaning is Egypt had storehouses. That represents savings. That represents planning. That represents systems. That represents security. That represents having something guaranteed. Egypt, in this story, was the place that had storehouses. So Egypt promised security. Egypt was the safe choice. And I don't judge Isaac at all, because I think it's very normal that when you find yourself in a moment of uncertainty, your brain wants to fix it as soon as possible. And so, of course, there is something within us that goes looking for safety, looking for security, looking for the safe choice. And in Isaac's case, this is actually what the last generation had done, what his family had done, what his ancestors had done, the last time there was a famine. So he had evidence for this choice. He had evidence that this would work. He had evidence that this was logical, that this was smart, that this was, in fact, the right thing to do. And yet, God comes to Isaac, his child, and says, that is not required. And that is actually not what you are called to do. And I know this message could get a little uncomfortable for somebody today, but what if the safe choice is not what you are called to do now? What if what worked in the past is not what you are called to do now? What if what your family expects is not what you are called to do now? And so it says, God appeared to Isaac and said, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land where I tell you to live. Stay in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. So God says, I know Egypt feels like the safe choice. I know Egypt is what you know. I know Egypt is what you grew up with. I know Egypt is what worked in the past. I know Egypt is what you have seen modeled for you, but don't go down to Egypt. Stay right here. And God gives him reassurance of 3 things. And I am so passionate about this message today because I believe this is the message of God, the word of God, the voice of God, the confirmation of God, the love of God for every single person connected to this training. And if you can hear it and receive it today, it will heal your heart and change your life. God gives him reassurance of 3 things. Number 1, I love you, and I am still with you. I love you, and I am still with you. You are just as loved right now as you have ever been. I have not left you. I have not abandoned you. You are not being punished, and you are not on your own. I love you. And you are unconditionally loved. Nothing you will ever do could change that. And I'm with you. And I'm going to be with you. Always, always, always. Number 2, God gives him reassurance. The perfect destiny plan for your life is still in motion. You can read the full poetry of it in Genesis 26, and there's a reference to another story from the past, but what you need to understand is God brings Isaac back to the plan, back to the purpose, back to the destiny path. And God says, this is still unfolding. I haven't forgotten about this. This has not gone off the rails. This has not been sabotaged. This has not been sidetracked. This has not been stopped. The perfect destiny plan for your life is still in motion. I wish somebody would hear that and let that truth in and receive that today. You are still going to reach your destiny. It is not too late. And you have not been abandoned, and you are still exactly where you're supposed to be. And the plan is still in motion. And then number 3, God gives him reassurance. You are blessed now and forever. You are blessed now and forever. I don't care what's going on out there. I don't care how it feels. I don't care what everybody's saying out there. This is the truth. You're hearing it directly from me. You are blessed now and forever. And that is more true than anything you are experiencing in this moment in a famine. So Isaac has a choice, because there's a whole story going around all of society about this famine at the time. And Isaac has a choice to buy into the story. But then God shows up and God says, I have a different story for you to believe, a different story for you to buy into, a different story for you to step into agreement with today. And you get to choose what story you live into. And that is true for every single person watching or listening to this today. You get to choose what story you live into. I am not unaware of all the stories that are out there for you to hear, for you to believe, for you to take on right now. But if those stories aren't feeding your soul, if those stories aren't serving you, if those stories aren't adding anything to your life, you might want to pause and consider today, am I believing the right story? Am I believing, choosing, owning today the story that I want to be living into and creating from right now? I believe you can make the decision today. I'm going to step into a better story. That God loves me and is with me always and even now. That the perfect destiny plan for my life is still in motion. And that I am blessed now, always, and forever. Let me know in the comments if you are claiming that for yourself today. I'm choosing a new story. I'm committing to a new story. I'm standing in a new story today. See, the truth is, we don't have to. In a scary moment, personally, or collectively, or circumstantially, we don't have to make the choice to go back to the familiar, to cling to the external thing that feels safe, to go with the crowd and lower the bar and just accept what everybody else is saying and doing. We have another choice. We get to choose the story we live in, even in these moments and especially in those moments. And I want to tell somebody today, the world's system is not the relief you're looking for. I'm not against external things, right? We are meant, as I said, to be living in the world. But there's not a magic strategy out there that is your perfect answer. There's not one mentor out there that if you can just work with them, hire them, do their program, everything would be fixed. That there's not an answer out there that's going to give you what you're looking for. I'm not saying don't study. I'm not saying don't research. I'm not saying don't invest. I'm not saying don't be wise. I'm not saying don't take action. But the world's system is not the relief that you're looking for. Even if it literally feels like the stakes for you and for the world today are just as bad as they were in this ancient story of famine, your job is still to know that God loves you, that God is with you, that the perfect destiny plan is still unfolding, and that you are blessed eternally, which includes right now. And that might be an unfamiliar story to you. That might be a story you haven't ever been able to fully wrap your mind around. That might not be a story that feels true or accessible right now. But I'm here for a reason. And this message is reaching you when it is for a reason, so that you can get this new story into your life, into your heart, into your consciousness, on every level at the depths of your being. And some of you need to replay this again and again and again until this new story starts to permeate your consciousness and permeate your life. And my message to you will always be, Even if it looks like a famine out there, you still have it all. You still have it all. I want you to close your eyes and just breathe into that. Feel into that. Claim that for yourself for just a moment. I still have it all. That hasn't changed. I might be looking at the appearance of something negative, something scary, something intense. I still have it all. I might be looking at the appearance of a threat or a scarcity or a deficit, but I still have it all. I might be looking at an unknown future and I don't know how it's going to unfold and I'm worried about it. I still have it all. And you are still just as eternally blessed right now, no matter what it looks like or what is happening out there. I wrote this down and I feel it in my bones. This is a moment not to believe the story of fear, but to choose to live in the story of blessing. I remember the first time I read Marianne Williamson talking about this principle of divine blessing and what it means to be eternally blessed. And she talks about how the eternal is the spiritual, invisible, energetic realm that is beyond space and time. There is a reason that we call it the eternal now, right? And I remember it touched me so deeply when Marianne said, to be eternally blessed means you are always blessed right now. It never stops, it never ends, it never changes. To be eternally blessed means you are blessed now and always and forever. So I want you to answer for yourself as you watch this or listen to this today. What is the Egypt that is tempting you right now? Maybe it's a relationship that you know is not really what you want and you know isn't serving you and you know it's not going anywhere, but it makes your loneliness feel better in the moment and it's comforting and so it's easy to go back. Maybe it's a way of doing things that used to be your norm, that even brought you success in a past season of life, and you know you're called to move beyond it, but you're scared. You're scared of what's going to happen if you really honor your zone of genius. You're scared of if you're going to be taken care of if you let go of this thing. You're scared about if you'll really be able to grow and increase and expand if you move beyond this. What is the Egypt that is tempting you to go back right now? And I want to challenge you today. Stay in your calling in this season. Stay in your assignment in this season. Stay in your purpose in this season. Don't abandon it in a time of famine. Some of you, that just means literally stay in the flow, stay in alignment, stay on the right track that you're already on, and keep going. Keep doing what you know you're called to do, that you're already locked in with. For others of you, you've been in a time of transition, and you know what the new thing is, what the new dimension is, what the new land is that you are meant to be living in. You're just scared to trust it. You're just scared to go all in there. And for either of these groups of people or anybody else that this is speaking to, I want to say, find your calling, stay there. Find your assignment, stay there. Find your purpose, stay there. That is the best thing that you can do during this time. Don't abandon it in a time of famine. Don't go back in a time of famine. Don't lower the bar in a time of famine. Stay there. Now, our main character, Isaac, we do have to give it to him because he does in fact stay. He stays in that land. He doesn't go to Egypt, right? And yet, he's a human being. And the fear still gets to him. And I am so glad that we have this story written for us and that we can learn from it and look at this and make neutral observations from it. Because if we can learn from what Isaac did in this story, in his moment of fear, we will see options and possibilities and opportunities available to us, even in the middle of our fear. So Isaac doesn't go to Egypt. He stays right where he is. But the family history, the family patterns, the family trauma still come back to haunt him a little bit. And doesn't that happen for us all? Something from our past, something from our childhood, something from our memories comes back to haunt us in a moment where we have enough fear that we can latch onto it, right? So this family pattern comes back. And the pattern is, it's okay to get out of integrity, to protect yourself. The pattern essentially is, it's okay to get out of integrity. It's okay to leave your alignment. It's okay to not be true to who you are in order to protect yourself. And so in this story, and this might seem like a weird example, but it's a different culture and a different time, thousands and thousands of years ago, right? But the text says that the men of this place, this land that Isaac is in, start asking him about his wife. They're interested. They're checking her out. They want to know, what's the deal here? Is she available? And Isaac says, she is my sister, because he was afraid. The text says he was afraid to say, she is my wife, because he thought the men of this place might just kill me on account of my wife, because she is that beautiful. Hear the principle of this. Isaac became afraid. He stayed in the land. He was trying. He was doing his best. But he became afraid. And specifically, he was overcome with a fear that he was going to lose what he loved. Fear can be an intense force within us in any version of it. Fear of loss is particularly striking. There's something heavy about being afraid to lose what we really love. And I want to ask you so gently and compassionately today, what are you afraid of losing right now? Because do you see, that's the only reason any of this matters. That's the only reason this feels so high stakes. That's the only reason that our nervous system goes into fight or flight and we don't know what to do and we can't think clearly. It's because of fear. And we start to be consumed by the fear of what we might lose. What are you afraid of losing right now? Can you look at that neutrally, gently, through the eyes of love and compassion and grace for yourself? What are you afraid of losing? What have you been afraid of losing in this season? Can you see how the fear of losing has been affecting you more than you realized? The fear of loss is a very strong force, and it always affects us more than we realize. When we start operating in that place at cause, there are countless effects that get born out of that fear. We see evidence of that fear everywhere we turn. We see confirmation of that fear everywhere we turn. We see triggers that spike that fear again and again and again everywhere we turn. Can you see how the fear of loss has maybe been affecting you in ways you didn't even realize? I know this is a funny example for me to always quote, but it really made an impression on me when I watched the movie Crazy Rich Asians. And there is a scene at the beginning of that movie where a gaming expert is talking about how to gamble successfully and win. And the expert talks about how it is so crucial that you are always playing to win rather than playing not to lose. And I remember, it's funny, it actually really distracted me in this movie because I was fixated on this idea, and so the movie is continuing to play, and I should be moving on with the movie, but my mind is still stuck on this principle. But the expert says, the minute that you start playing not to lose, you've already lost. And this is going to be a little confrontational, but, buckle your seatbelt and let's go, because this is for somebody today, and this is going to change somebody's trajectory today. I really believe there are people watching this and listening to this, and you didn't even realize it, but you've gotten stuck in playing not to lose. Maybe a famine got you stuck in that. Maybe the future and all the unknown got you stuck in that. Maybe the news got you stuck in that. Maybe your relatives, your family, your kids got you stuck in that. Maybe some changes in your business got you stuck in that. Maybe somebody that hurt you got you stuck in that. Maybe the disappointment of an unfulfilled desire or dream got you stuck in that. I don't know what it is. But I believe there are people watching or listening to this today. And there was a time when you were excited, you were inspired, you could see a vision clearly. And in that time in the past, you played to win. You truly played to win. But times have changed. And somewhere along the way, without you even realizing it, you started playing not to lose. Maybe you thought that was the safe choice. Maybe you thought that was the responsible thing to do. Maybe you thought that would protect you. Maybe you thought that was justified for a season and you told yourself you would get back to your old self. Maybe you did it for survival and you didn't know what else to do. You thought that was the only thing that you could do. But I came today to interrupt the cycle of playing not to lose. Because if you're playing not to lose, you've already lost. Nothing that you desire is going to be created from the fear of loss. So today, we've got to make a shift. Not just into staying in our calling, staying in our assignment, staying in that land, but we've got to make a shift. Playing not to lose is not going to cut it anymore. I have to get out of this survival mindset. I've got to stop thinking from crisis to crisis. I've got to stop living from problem to problem to problem I can solve. I've got to reclaim the vision, reclaim my desires and dreams. It's time again to play to win. I've got to get my expectation back. I've got to get my belief back. I've got to get my faith back, because it only works when I play to win. And I want you to see that. If playing not to lose could get you good results, I would say by all means, do what you want, do what you need to do, play not to lose. But nothing good and nothing you want is created from playing not to lose. Everything you want requires you to go for it. And I believe this is a life-changing day for people as you recognize, I don't know where along the way I made this shift by accident, but I'm making the shift back today, or maybe for the first time, or to a greater extent than I ever have before. I am ready to go for it, to play to win. No more fear of loss running my life. If I feel fear in a moment, I know that I can handle it. and I will be with myself, and I will stay in my body, and I will love myself unconditionally right then and there, and I will breathe and process and move through that energy. I can do that. I can handle a moment of fear, but I will not let fear of loss get in the driver's seat of my life. Because see, when we move into a place of fear, when fear of loss starts running the show, we start getting out of integrity. We start doing silly things, uncharacteristic things, things we would never otherwise do. And we ultimately start sabotaging ourselves. Could it be your sabotage is due to the playing not to lose? Could it be your stuckness is due to playing not to lose? Could it be the stagnancy is due to playing not to lose? What's wild is Isaac was so afraid, but he actually never had anything to be afraid of. It's wild because as the story progresses, I'll just read it to you. The leaders find out that Isaac has been doing some shady stuff, that he's changed up the details a little bit, that he's been telling a story that is not the truth. And the leaders come to him and they ask him, "Why did you lie to us?" And Isaac answered him, and hear this, I want to teach this in a very specific way. Isaac answered him and said, "Because I thought I might lose my life on account of her." And I just want to pause there and say, I am not judging anybody for their fear today. And I think it's actually very healing in a weird way, therapeutic in a weird way, in this story to recognize the fear makes sense to the terrified ego, to the terrified nervous system, to the terrified inner child. Isaac says, look, I didn't want to do this. It's not who I am to do this. It's not even normal for me to do this. But I've been in a weird place, and it's led to me doing some weird stuff that doesn't even feel like me anymore. And I ended up there because I was scared. Because simply I thought I might die. And I actually believe there is a deep psychological insight hidden in this ancient scripture. Because how many of us know that at the root of so much of our fear, it is the part of us that actually thinks, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to survive this. I'm not going to be on the other side. I might not succeed. I might not get there. I might not be okay. And how real is it? How universal is it? How human is it that whether or not the fear is warranted, our ego will always sell it to us like, you might die. You might not be okay. You might not make it. This is a heavy topic to speak to, but I have learned there is a reason often when my clients are in an exceptional, new, expanded level of success that is very fresh and exciting for them, these weird, bizarre, worst case scenario fears start popping up. And the fears suddenly make them convinced that something terrible is going to happen. And because I've seen this play out so many times, I know what's happening. I know what's going on in the psyche. I know what to speak to there. And so in those moments, I always say to clients, you're having this fear because there is a part of you that doesn't know what to do with life getting that good. With that much change, with that much success. And whether you stepped into it and it freaked you out, or just the mere thought of it, just even approaching it, taking it seriously, getting close to it, freaked you out. Facing that level of good, that level of success, that level of what you want has triggered a fear for you. And it's not rational, but it feels so real. And you've got to know there is nothing real about that. This is not a sign. This is not a premonition. There is nothing there that you need to take seriously. There is nothing there that you need to be cautious or concerned about. It's just, there's a part of you that can't process actually being safe and stable and successful on this level. And if that's you, I want you to hear this word today. I promise you, there was never anything to fear. You will look back one day and say, there was never anything to fear. And I would offer to you that you can step into that story now, even before you see it all play out. Because as we read forward in the text, the leader of the land that Isaac is in actually gives an order, makes a proclamation, gives a decree all across the land. Anyone, he says, who harms this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Now, I know that's a little extreme, okay? Like, wouldn't bodyguards be enough, okay? But hear this. The principle of this story is that Isaac goes from desperately worrying about his own security and his family's security and the security of what matters to him most and what he loves. He goes from worrying about his security to having the highest level of security provided for him. Look how protected he was. And I want to point out, he was always protected. He was always safe. He would always have been okay. He just couldn't see it, because where there could have been faith, there was fear of loss. You know, sometimes we are so focused on what we are afraid of losing that we don't see what we have the potential to gain. Sometimes we're so focused on what we are afraid of losing, we don't see what we have the potential to gain. I'll just help some people out who are in sales in any form with this principle real quick. If you are having difficulty selling people into something that you offer, consider that for whatever combination of reasons, and it could be a couple different things, right? But consider that part of the reason people may not be buying is that they're looking at the offer. They're looking at the possibility. They're looking at what's in front of them. And because of all the different factors of your sales process right now and the conversations you're having, etc., all they can see is what it's going to cost them, and that outweighs everything else. And so what they're going to lose is all they can see. That becomes the loudest voice. That wins in the end. And I just want to help somebody out who's in sales today and say, that only wins in the end when people are more sold on what they might lose or what it would require or what it might cost them than what they have to gain, right? You know, when I did my first ever series of teachings that taught the principle of giving this year, somebody messaged me and said, Stefan, I've never done this before in my life. This is completely new to me. But I resonate with this so much. I know you're talking to me. I want to participate in this. In the past, they said, I never thought I had enough. I never thought I even had enough to sow. It never even felt worth doing. But I am breaking that pattern today. I am starting to practice this today. Not just one time I'm taking a gamble, right? And hear this, because it would be easy to hear this story and go, wow, sounds like really worth the one-time gamble. But I need you to hear, this person didn't do it as a one-time gamble. Let me throw a penny into the fountain and hope for good luck. They said, I hear the law and the principle of this. I get it. And I am beginning to put this into practice today, believing whatever my seed looks like in this moment, that it will be increased and it will be expanded. They sent me a message to tell me this, okay? Within 30 minutes, before I even had a chance to read their first message, there was a follow-up that said, I just had to update you. The amount I sowed 30 minutes ago has already come back to me. But it didn't just come back to me with an equivalent. It didn't just come back to me with a little bit more. It came back to me 18 times multiplied in 30 minutes. Then they sent me an update. They said 72 hours later, it came back to me multiplied 45 times over. It didn't just come back, it came back with 44 other friends of that same amount. Now, I never tell anybody, here's the exact timetable or ratio or proportions you can expect, right? This is a principle, it's not an equation. This is a principle, it's not a formula. This is a principle, it's not superstition. And I've given for more than a decade, and I've seen the principle work consistently all that time. And I also have seen every rate of return possible, with every timetable possible. So this isn't a superstitious guarantee that encourages a gambling mindset. But this is belief in Allah and the willingness to work a principle consistently, believing more in what you have to gain than what you're afraid to lose. See, imagine if that person who decided to participate in the challenge, imagine if they felt like what they had in their hand was the end. And they didn't want to lose it, and they let the fear take over, and they felt like their job was just to cling on to it, like the best thing that they could do, the smart thing that they could do is, let me make sure that nobody takes this from me, even though this amount isn't going to change my life anyway. Let me cling on to it and let fear of loss run everything. What if they did that and missed out on the opportunity that the universe had ready and waiting for them to receive so much more? I think it's a fun thing to just sit with and consider and feel into as a practice, as an experiment. What if it turned out that the universe had 45 times more worth to give you than you were even expecting or praying for or imagining? I always quote, Course in Miracles says, God comes with dreams 1,000 times as wonderful as anything we ever dared to dream or imagine. God's dream is bigger. God's dream is greater. God's dream is better than even the best one you have for yourself. It's not worse. It's not less. It's not a crappy version. It is exponentially more. But you have to be willing to see what you have to gain, not just what you're afraid to lose. So in this story, Isaac realizes that he is safe. He realizes that God is in fact with him, that the plan is still unfolding, that he is in fact where he is supposed to be. He realizes that this eternal blessing is still on him and working on his behalf. And he does something next that I really want us to just learn from today. It says, then Isaac sowed in that land. That land, by the way, the very land that he thought about leaving. And wait until you hear what's about to happen next in the land he almost left. I know I'm interrupting my text reading, and this isn't in my notes, but I feel really called to say, God gives you free will. God gives you agency. God gives you freedom of choice, power of decision. And what that means is the divine destiny plan is always available for you in the quantum field as a reality that you can tap into at any time. But you can always choose. You can choose to go create something else in the meantime. You can choose to delay it. You can choose to run from it. You can choose to hide. You always get to choose. Imagine if the fear took over and the famine seemed too overwhelming and Isaac bought into the idea that everybody else around him believed that this means something. This means we're under a curse. This means it's all over. Imagine if he did that and he didn't stay in the land and sow what he might have missed out on. And I just really feel called to say to somebody today, you have no idea how much good, how much joy, how much success is waiting for you in this land. Please give it a chance. Give it a chance. You have no idea what is waiting for you in this land. You have no idea the harvest that is waiting for you on the other side of a seed. And so it says, then Isaac sowed in that land. And he reaped in the same year. In the middle of a famine, which we'll talk about in a moment. He reaped in the same year 100-fold. 100-fold. And God blessed him. And he began to prosper and continued prospering until he became very prosperous. If you have made it this far in the training, I believe that we're connected. I believe that this is speaking to you. I believe that you are hearing what you need from God in this message today. And so if you've made it this far and you're connected to me watching or listening now, I just want to decree and to declare over you that in this season, you begin to prosper like never before. No matter how this year or this season has gone for you thus far, that in this season, you begin to prosper like never before. That you will just continue prospering and expanding into that more and more and more until you become undeniably very prosperous. I decree that and declare that over you today if you've made it this far in the training. And what's so powerful to me about this story is that once he realizes that he's safe, once he realizes that he can rest in God, once he realizes that he can trust the future, he does the only thing that any of us can do with our resources that has a guarantee. And I'm talking a spiritual guarantee. You know, I think a lot of this story is about, in an uncertain time, people look around for various guarantees, right? And where we look for a guarantee matters. There is a reason that when I'm talking to a client who is in crisis, I always challenge them. What truth can we anchor in for you? What truth can we trust in this moment? What truth can we rely on unconditionally today? Right? Because where we look for a guarantee matters. And the truth is, saving, well, wise and practical and often a responsible choice, saving does not come with a spiritual guarantee. We've all observed that. We've all had it happen for ourselves or somebody else where They got stuck in a loop of saving so that they had more than enough ready to go, and then something came in, took out the savings, and they always seem to reset back to the same set point. Again, nothing wrong with saving, but it doesn't come with a spiritual guarantee, and we all know that. On the flip side, spending doesn't come with a guarantee. I know there's people who say, if you just spend money and have an abundance mindset, it's all going to work out. And some of you are like, yeah, I've done that, I've tried that, it didn't work out for me. Spending doesn't come with a spiritual guarantee, but sowing does. Because it is law, and the law is the law is the law is the law. It is the law of cause and effect. It is the law of the seed. It is the law of the harvest. And it says, as long as the earth remains, you can count on it. There is seed time, and if there is seed time, there is harvest. You can count on it. It is law. That which a person sows, they will always, always, always reap. Always. And by the way, in the ancient spiritual traditions, can we just talk about, they believed in this so much. They even had teachings and principles in place that said, even if your harvest were to get sabotaged, or lost, or damaged, or ruined, or stolen in some way. And I know there are people out there watching and listening to this, and you feel that way. You feel like what should have been the harvest in this past season got sabotaged. What I was expecting as a harvest here never showed up. What was my harvest here? Something happened to it. Someone hurt me. Something ruined it. And I want you to know there are even principles and teachings in the ancient text and tradition that say, if and when that happens, your harvest will be restored. And you will not just get back what you lost, you will get back even more, substantially more, significantly more. But you will always reap what you sow. This is not ultimately about grain, specifically. This is not ultimately about money, specifically, right? This is about the fact that everything comes to you in the form of seed. I did a whole teaching on this. I'll link it here. You can dive in for yourself. But when you understand the law of the seed, that everything comes to you in the form of a seed, and I always have a seed to sow in some form. If you understand that principle, you understand why the best thing that Isaac could possibly do in this moment would be for him to sow. You always have something in your hand, in your life. You always have something to sow. And life shows up. It all arrives to us. It all comes to us in the form of a seed. We always have the opportunity to sow. You know, part of the reason I felt really drawn to teach this principle in this way as I was downloading all of this month is, this really is the most ancient system out there for giving, for receiving, for circulating resources on this planet. This is an ancient one. This is a timeless one. It predates all economies. It predates all economic models. It predates governments. It predates depressions, recessions, inflation, every form of circumstance. It predates it all. And what that tells me is, this is not a Band-Aid on a broken system. This is an eternal flow that was built into the fabric of the universe. I could go on a soapbox about this, and I will restrain myself here, but let me just say, there are a lot of people who get swept up in debates of capitalism this, socialism this, communism this, free market this, inflation this, and listen, thank God for people who are good with numbers, and thank God for people who can think about and discuss those things, but I'm just of the belief in this moment, and it is simply my assignment to teach. We don't need just a Band-Aid for a broken system. We need an eternal flow that works for everyone, that predates all of the mess, that was built into the fabric of the universe. Now, we should acknowledge it's always a good time to sow, right? Because everything shows up in the form of a seed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it is worth acknowledging here, in the context of this story, Isaac sowed in a moment of famine. I think that's important to acknowledge because that seems counterintuitive. That seems unproductive. That seems like the wrong choice to make. Why did Isaac choose to sow in a moment of famine? And interestingly enough, nobody in the story told him to sow. It isn't like God gave a specific instruction. It isn't like there was a ritual he had to follow. It isn't like this was a new part of the narrative here. Isaac sowed because he understood the principle, and he was a sower. It was a belief and a practice and an identity that was so ingrained, no pun intended with grain, see what I did there? It was so ingrained into the core of who he was. Even in a famine, he was going to sow. That's just who he was. I wrote these things down about what makes people sow, even in a time of famine. We sow when we really trust. Not when we're in a transactional place. And it's funny to me because I think when it comes to giving and this idea of sowing a seed, there's a lot of people out there that think it's this cheap message, that it's superficial and transactional, and it's people being superstitious and silly, and people trying to buy a miracle. And I will tell you, I have a small but mighty group of partners all around the world that support me and support this work every single time they give. They share an intention with me when they give. They give their seed and assignment. They let me know, this is what I am standing in agreement with you for. And so I hear from them often. And I message them, and I pray for them, and I stay connected to them. I know their hearts. I know what they've expressed to me. I know where they're coming from. And I can tell you, it is so far from transactional. And every single person, I will tell you, who partners with me consistently, it is something they thought about greatly. It is something that they meditated about. It is something that they prayed about. It is something that their intuition led them in. It is something that they felt so confirmed in at the core of their being. We don't sow transactionally. And I don't really believe that there's many people out there doing that or teaching that or modeling that. We sow when we trust. We sow when we have a vision and we can see our future and feel secure about it. Let me pause here and say, do you realize what a powerful countercultural declaration it was for Isaac to sow in a time of famine when everybody else out there, as you heard me quote the Yale historian say, everybody else out there literally believed civilization might just collapse. They might go extinct. They might not make it because famine meant no water. No water means no crops. No crops means no food. They were afraid of starving. They were afraid of dying. You can imagine how, when those are the concerns, it's hard not to be in fear of loss. It's hard not to be in a survival mode. It's hard to hold on to a vision in that place. But Isaac could still see a future, and God still talked to him about a future. God still talked to him about his destiny. God still talked to him about how there was a a divine plan still underway that he got to live into. We sow when we can see our future and feel secure about it. By the way, one of the things I want to put out into the world, something I am sowing into the world, into the universe with this training, is a message of faith and a message of empowerment and a message of vision in a moment where everybody's discussing with a lot of question marks. What's going to happen with the economy? What's going to happen with AI? Where are we headed with technology? What is the future going to look like? What about this? What about that? In a moment of uncertainty, I am sowing into the universe a teaching of faith that says, I still have a vision. And I pray that you still have a vision. And I am inviting you to join me in that. Last but not least, I wrote, we sow when we know there is blessing flowing to us. We sow when we know there is blessing flowing through us. You know, in famine, the temptation is to hoard. The temptation is to get scared. The temptation is to go into protective mode. But you don't have to do that when you know you are divinely protected. And I am here to remind you today, the blessing is still flowing to you. You know, the system of the external world is working and fighting and hoarding and owning and exploiting to get survival and success. I know that's a bunch of words, but just hear this one more time. Working and fighting and hoarding and owning and exploiting to get survival and success. That may not be explicitly taught in schools or in childhood, but that's what we see modeled all the time. Lots of hard work, lots of fighting and brutal competition, lots of hoarding and holding on to what's yours. Lots of owning and getting possessive and attached, and that's where I get my worth from. Lots of exploiting, as if I don't exploit somebody else, I'm not going to make it. Working, fighting, hoarding, owning, exploiting. There's a lot of that out there. And I'm not against work, and I'm not against ownership, okay? But you can feel the energy of that whole paradigm. And we are taught that energy, that pathway leads to survival and then success. But there's a better way. I believe if you're watching this training, you're ready for a better way. The system of divine blessing in the invisible realm is stay in your assignment. Sow what you have where you are, and keep receiving directly from God as your source. Feel the energy of that paradigm. Stay in your assignment. Sow what you have right where you are, and know you are receiving directly from God as your source. It may not seem logical to a part of your mind, this paradigm, this system, but can we acknowledge the metaphysical and the spiritual truth never is? And yet it is time to grow up and expand into that which has been true all along, which has been most real all along, which has been available to us all along. This might be a niche, nerdy example, but I was thinking about how we used to have an outdated understanding of particles in their smallest form from the scientific method. We used to think that we had gotten all of life down to its smallest building block, and that was atoms. And we used to think we can explain all of how matter behaves completely. And yet, as we continue to learn, as we continue to get more information, we expanded beyond that paradigm. And in a literal sense, our technology improved to where we were suddenly able to start observing even inside of an atom. We were able to observe so much more than we used to be. And so, I know this is nerdy, but stay with me here. Where we used to think that an atom was the smallest building block of reality, suddenly we could see more. We expanded into a new paradigm. We had new information. And suddenly what we could see is that inside of an atom, there were a bunch of even smaller particles in continual motion. And most fascinating of all to me is that we discovered they will disappear one place within the cell, and they will almost miraculously appear somewhere else in the cell. And we don't have an explanation. This is the smallest level of reality that we can scientifically observe, and it's a miracle. We don't have an explanation for why they disappear one place and reappear elsewhere. Our best guess, according to quantum physics, is that there is an innate intelligence and consciousness within all of the energy and all of the particles that tells them what to do. But we can't explain it. There is a level to which it is simply miraculous, right? It's time for your paradigms to expand to something that may not seem like it all mathematically, logically makes sense according to the dysfunctional, broken system in which many of us were raised, right? But it's time to expand into it and to realize I don't have to know why the particle disappears here and reappears here. I just know that somehow it works. Somehow it works. I don't have to know how a seed can turn into a harvest that seems so disproportionately greater than the seed. It doesn't even seem to mathematically add up. But I know that that's real, and I know that that's built into the fabric of the universe, and I know that that works. So I celebrate today Isaac making the decision to sow, even when it defied logic. Because we do recognize a famine should have made it impossible to reap anything, much less a good harvest. Technically speaking, scientifically speaking, literally speaking, a famine should have made it impossible for him to receive anything, much less a very good harvest. But this defies logic. This is sowing and reaping as a spiritual principle. He sowed, and even though it didn't logically make sense, he reaped the biggest harvest of his life. Against the odds. Because the odds had nothing to do with it. The odds were irrelevant. This is a word for somebody today. The famine does not determine your harvest. You determine your harvest. The famine is not going to determine your harvest. You determine your harvest. And you have the power of seed to go to work for you. I want to speak to somebody's life today that the story is not going to end the way that the world is making you think it will. It's not over, and this is not the end, and you don't have to give in to the doom and the gloom and the fear. I want to invite you to feel into this with me. What if this is actually meant to be the best year of your life? What if this season is exactly where your next level of prosperity begins? What if this is the year that you become a sower and you end up reaping like you have never reaped before, in a way that doesn't make logical sense, in a way that defies all the odds? What if that is the story that you get to be sharing as a testimony and celebrating at the end of this year? What if that is the story that you get to share with your loved ones, with your community, with your clients? What if in the middle of a season where so many people's consciousness was filled with famine, you had unprecedented success? I love reframing that word because there are so many people out there talking about unprecedented challenges, unprecedented circumstances, unprecedented this, that, the other. What if in this very moment, in this very season, you were meant to have unprecedented success? I find it so striking that where this story starts is so different than where it ends. But man, is it a good story when we have the whole thing. You know, I remember as I was teaching the beginning of this, and by the way, people often ask me, do you record all at once? Do you record in chunks? How long does it take? Because obviously I have lengthy trainings here. This is probably a 4-hour process of recording and putting this together for you today. And probably, I want to say, a 20-hour process of study and preparation and reflection getting ready for this. So, you know, we'll say 25 hours, give or take, have I sowed into your life and into your world with this training. I pray that it falls on good ground for you. I pray that you're receiving it. But hear this, because, you know, the start of the story, nobody is thinking about 100-fold return. And it's funny because until I was guided back to this story recently myself, I couldn't have told you that this was a story with a 100-fold return. I was unaware of that. Lots of people use the phrase 100-fold return. I love it. I think it's a beautiful thing to affirm as we sow. But I didn't realize that this was the first mention of that. I didn't realize that this is where that came from. And what's so wild is, at the beginning of this story, people are just thinking about safety. People are just thinking about survival. People are just thinking about the frightening future of civilization. Nobody is thinking about massive success. Nobody is thinking about an ever-increasing prosperity. Nobody is thinking about a 100-fold return, except for God. Because God still loved Isaac, and God was still with him, and the perfect destiny plan was still unfolding, and God still had eternal blessing in unending supply to give. And I really believe my biggest intention for this training might just be to switch up the narrative within you. You know, I don't usually like a bait and switch, but maybe I'll say, in a very in integrity way, this might be a divine bait and switch of the narrative for somebody today. Because you're looking at famine, you're looking at challenges, you're looking at questions and circumstances and problems. And this is a divine switch of the narrative within you. It's time to think about unprecedented success. It's time to think about ever-increasing prosperity. It's time to open your mind to the possibility of a 100-fold return. Why? Because the weather does not determine your harvest. Your seed determines your harvest. If the weather determined your harvest, if that was the principle, then it would be reasonable to lower your expectations. It would be reasonable to lower the bar. It would be reasonable to decrease your faith a little bit, okay? But the weather does not determine the harvest. Your seed determines the harvest. And you have the power to sow. You have the power to create a harvest. I want to encourage you with a couple thoughts today from my heart to yours, okay? Number one, don't leave the place where you are called right now. Don't leave the place where you are called right now. This is a tricky thing to speak to because I know that so many people have pivoted over the last few years. And I do realize often there is a pivot that comes from your soul. Often there is a pivot that is meant for you. But there's a lot of people out there that I believe are thinking about quitting, thinking about putting 30% of yourself into it from here on out, thinking about quiet quitting on your purpose, your dreams, your destiny. And I want you to hear today, don't leave the place where you are called right now. Number two, be willing to believe in your future and sow into it. Be willing to believe in your future and sow into it. You know, one characteristic of Isaac as somebody that created massive and ever-increasing prosperity is he was always willing to sow. He was always willing to believe in his future, and he was always willing to sow into it, right? And I just want to distinguish here. Purpose-driven people are able to keep moving towards their future and their dreams and their destiny, even in a famine, no matter what is going on out there. Reactive people put it all on hold until the famine clears. Be willing to believe in your future and sow into it. And then number three, don't lower the bar to a survival mentality. Expect a record-breaking return during this time. Do you feel the switch of the narrative there? We're not just getting you out of a survival mentality today, a panicked place, a place driven by fear of loss. We're not just getting you out of that today. We are switching up the narrative completely. Expect a record-breaking harvest during this time. That is an ancient principle of unprecedented harvest available even in famine. And so you have the opportunity to do the same thing modeled in this story thousands and thousands of years ago, a timeless principle that always works in any season of famine. You have the opportunity to sow. I'm speaking today to those of you who are already partners with me, and I'm speaking today to any of you who this message has spoke to, that you have received it as a gift. To any of you who feel called to join us and participate in this moment. As you know, we put this teaching into the world completely free of charge. Available on different platforms for over 2.9 billion people to access in well over 100 countries. This training is a seed I am sowing into the universe and sowing into you because I believe in you and I always will. We didn't charge anything for this training. We're not telling you this is the specific exact energy exchange that it must be. But we are giving you an invitation. If you want to support this message and this work, if you want to be a part of this moment, if you want to sow a seed into this word, this vision, this moment, right? You have the opportunity. And I want to be very clear. Please don't do this if you don't feel energetically called to do it. Please don't do this if you're not joyful and excited to do it. Certainly, please don't do this transactionally or from the energy of desperation. Please don't do anything you don't feel called to do. But I told you at the very beginning of this, I believe, this story comes from a text all about beginnings. And this is a story, this is a teaching, this is a moment about new beginnings. At the time of this live recording, we are almost midway through the year, and I believe this is true for people watching this here at this point in the calendar year. I believe this is true for others of you who will watch it at whatever point in the future. This is a moment for new beginnings. You know where you have lost the script, where the narrative got sidetracked, where fear of loss started taking over. You know where you started living from all the collective ideas and fear about the famine. You know the questions you've been asking. You know the need and the challenges you've been facing. You know where you've been afraid to lose something you love. You know where you've accidentally ended up in survival mode, playing not to lose. You know what this year or this season has been like for you up until this point. But this is a moment of new beginnings. That's what this is about. And I want to challenge you so as a starting point of something new. A Course in Miracles says we always find ourselves in the holy instant. A perfect present moment in which we can create whatever we want. A fresh starting point for whatever we want to create next. And as I once heard it said, how you respond is what comes next. That is so true in this moment. How you respond is what comes next. You have power because you have the power of decision. You have power because you have the power of response. You have power because you have the power of seed. So as a fresh starting point, because you know what you are setting into motion. You know what you are creating with certainty. You know what you are guaranteeing into your future when you sow. Because you know the season that you are stepping into. Because you know the chapter that you are calling into your life next. Because you know that God loves you and is with you, and the perfect destiny plan is still unfolding, and the blessing is on you right now. I wrote this down and I felt it so powerfully as I did. Famine may be the setting, but make no mistake, this is not a famine story. This is a success story. This is a prosperity story. This is a destiny story. Famine may be the setting, but this is not a famine story. This is a success story. And you have the opportunity to sow. Your seed is something that you value, that you are willing to invest in your future, because the potential you see is even greater than the current value of the seed. Let me say that again. Your seed is something you value, but also something you are willing to invest into your future, because the potential you see is even greater than the current value. If this is speaking right to your core, right to your heart, right to your soul, and giving you what you need, and painting a picture of the future and the harvest and the vision that is available for you in this time, I would love for you to participate and sow in this moment. I will be sowing today right there alongside with you, and every single one of you that chooses to participate in this moment. As I always say, never miss an opportunity to work your faith, to give your seed an assignment. Share your intentions with me. I will read them. I will bless them. I will pray over them with you and get in agreement with you. And as you've heard me say, I am not leaving that agreement. If this has not been a word for you, and this has not resonated with you today, I am a little fascinated that you stuck around and watched or listened all this time. But that's okay. Then this is not for you, right? I'm fine with that. And if you don't see this as good grounds, if this is not something that feeds you, that supports you, that blesses you, if you don't trust this work and you want to sow somewhere else, please do so. That will not hurt my feelings in the slightest, okay? But if this is a divine message speaking to you today, if this is what you needed to hear on a soul level, and it is resonating for you and shifting something within you and opening up possibilities for you, you have an invitation to participate in this moment, to support the work that brought you this message, and to receive it in a special way today. I was sitting with what are people going to sow today as I was getting ready for this last night, and because of the principle of 100-fold return, which still boggles my mind, like from famine to a multiple of 100, that's such a beautiful story of what is possible in any circumstance, right? Since the 100-fold return is in the story, I think it's fun to play with multiples of 10, with increments of that number. And so what I heard was, some of you will sow 100, and that will be valuable seed that you put into your future today. Please share what you're believing for with me. I am in agreement with you. Some of you today will feel called to sow 1,000, and that will be valuable seed for you to sow. And again, please share your intention with me. I am in agreement with you. Some of you will sow a specific number that has significance to you. And I support that, by the way. I have done so many seeds that I put in the ground over the years that were a repeating number, a very specific number, a number that was tied to something or had a meaning for me, so I'm right there with you. And then one of you, and I'm nervous to say this, but I just felt it as I was getting ready, so I said, okay, God, I'll write it down. One of you out there, I believe, is going to sow 100,000, whatever your currency is, maybe dollars, maybe something else, but one of you out there is going to sow 100,000 into this work and into this moment. And by the way, if you're giving at that level, number one, if you need wire transfer instructions or alternate information, message me, message my team. We will accommodate and get that to you. Number two, if you want to know, if you're curious about what is my 100,000 going to support, where is it going to go, and you're serious about giving on that level, again, please message me. In fact, in this case, I'm going to say don't message my team. Please message me personally. I would love to share with you, just so you can hear from me. There are 3 divine instructions that I feel ready to follow that will immediately be implemented with that $100,000. Happy to share that with you. And I know some of you watching this are like, that's obscene. I can't even imagine that amount, right? But understand, when you get into the lifestyle, the habit, the identity of being a sower and being a giver, you build up over time, right? You expand in increments, and your confidence and your trust and your faith with it grows in increments. I have given amounts that a former version of me would never have believed, would have been terrified and anxious and panicked about, would have tried to jump into the future and stop me and say, no, surely you can do something else with this money. But I have sowed numerous times large amounts that a former version of me wouldn't have even believed, to somebody that spoke to me, to somebody that blessed me, to somebody that I wanted to support, to somebody that I heard God through, to somebody that I knew was making the world a better place. And I did so in faith. I didn't get there overnight, but I got there because I have a lot of evidence about the law of the harvest. It's not hard to wrap your mind around. Sowing any amount, when you understand the law of the harvest and you understand that what comes back is always even greater than what you gave. That's just for one person out there. Some of you it's 100, some of you it's 1,000, some of you it's a specific number that has personal significance for you. As I've said before, the beautiful thing about choosing to create content and serve people and receive in this way is that I don't have to set one specific energy exchange here. If you hire me as a coach, right, which you're still welcome to do, invited to do if we have availability, there's a set energy exchange, right? This is the container, this is the package, this is the number. There is a set energy exchange. This is not that situation. This is an energy exchange between you and God and your seed and your vision. All we know for sure is that according to what you sow, you will reap. The measure with which you sow will be the measure of the harvest. Do it in a way that is meaningful and powerful for you. I know this word today is not going to be for everybody. I know this word today might be controversial. I know this word today might be different from other programs and courses and trainings you've seen me do in the past. But I really felt called in a time when so many people are talking about famine. We've got to get out of the famine story. We've got to get out of protection mode. We've got to get out of fear of loss. And I am believing there are people watching this today, people who are already partnered with me, people who are going to partner with me today in getting out a message of faith and unconditional love and empowerment to the world. And you are going to step into a record-breaking harvest, an unprecedented level of return, an unprecedented experience of prosperity this year. And we get to write that story together. I want to pray with you in just a moment. And as you watch this, if you feel called to participate, please pause this video and then come back once you have sowed so that you can join me in agreement in this prayer. We have put the link up on the screen. It'll also be in the description below. It'll also be in the notes, the links connected to this video. All you have to do is type in whatever the amount that you feel called to give is. An amount that is valuable to you, but that you are willing to invest into your future because the potential you see is even greater than the current value. You get to choose the energy exchange of what you receive today, based on who you are, where you are, and where you're going. No seed is too small, no seed is too big. You get to put the amount there. You get to give an assignment to the seed. Never miss that opportunity. Share that with me. And that's it. That's all you have to do. It's that easy to get seed in the ground in a powerful moment and a life-changing moment like this one. So take care of it if you need to and pause this video and come back. But for those of you that are ready, let's close our eyes and I want to pray over every single one of you today. Thank you, God, that this truly is the holy instant. Thank you, God, for the new beginning that so many people just stepped into. Thank you for the person under the sound of my voice right now. Thank you for their life. Thank you for their story. Thank you, God, for all the twists and turns that have led them here to this moment. Thank you for their willingness to do the inner work. Thank you for the way they value timeless truth, the realm of the eternal, universal law and principle. Thank you that they are a person of purpose. Thank you that they are a person of vision. Thank you that they are a person of destiny that is committed to be all that they came here to be, to do all that they came here to do. God, in this moment, we recognize you are the reason we are here. You are the most real thing in our lives. You are the one eternal constant. In God, we live and move and have our being. You are the source of our very life. And you are our source and supply. We receive with gratitude. We give with gratitude. We trust with gratitude. We circulate with gratitude. We move in gratitude always. And God, we anchor in our identity in this moment, because it strikes me in this story, no matter what was going on around him, God brought Isaac back to the truth of who he was. And in this moment, I speak the word for every person watching this. They are a child of God. They are unconditionally loved. Nothing that they could ever do will ever change that. They have already been given all things. You have plans to prosper them, to give them a hope and a future. And there is eternal blessing always and forever on their life. God, I speak this word. May they feel it right now. Blessing is on them right now. May they go into the next moment and the next one and the next day and the next week, expecting to see evidence everywhere they turn that your blessing is on their life. I bless every single person today who has watched this. I pray that they received everything that they needed from it. God, you are outside of space and time, and I was in sacred agreement with you going into this training that I would be guided intuitively and divinely as I taught. That I would come from the vibration of heaven, from unconditional love. That I would share only what I was meant to share and nothing else. God, you know my heart, you know my integrity, you know that that is true. I will stop the recording and redo it if I sense that I said something that is not meant to be in this training. So I turn it over to you. I know this training is reaching people perfectly according to infinite intelligence and divine order, right on time. And I bless every single person getting exactly what they need from it. May they be inspired. May they be recharged. May they be healed. May they be uplifted. May they be transformed. May they return to their vision. May they see a future. May they know that this is not the end. May somebody who tuned into this incredibly discouraged realize that this is not the end of their story. May this training save lives. May this training restore hope. May this training build faith in people. God, may they know and feel how much you love them right now. May they know and feel that you're with them. May they know and feel that your blessing is on them. May they know and feel that the plan is still underway and it's all working together for them perfectly. And God, I specifically bless every person who hears the truth, the intuitive message, the word of this moment and says, I am choosing to sow. Because even if it's a time of famine, I choose to believe my greatest harvest yet is available. And I choose to increase. I choose to grow. I choose to expand. I choose to believe in my vision. I choose to believe in my future. For every person sowing today, God, I bless them into the 100-fold return that is demonstrated in this text. I bless them into the prosperity and the more prosperity and the very prosperous prosperity that is spoken of in this text. I bless them into seeing and experiencing and feeling the evidence that your blessing is on them and for them and with them always, always, always. God, I pray for speedy returns. I pray for rapid returns. I pray for multiplied returns on all levels. May people see the evidence that their sowing works, that they can depend on the law of the seed and the law of the harvest. God, I bless every dollar and every form of every currency that will be in circulation. God, you know our practices and standards. And so as every gift comes in and we continue to give, I bless every gift that moves in circulation, every dollar and every form of currency in motion throughout the world. May it all be blessed. May it all create more love. May it all amplify a message of peace and power and truth. May it all bring about the highest and best of everyone it touches. I call forth the highest and best of every single person watching now. I claim this as a new beginning for anyone who wants it. I claim this as a day that people will look back on as a line in the sand kind of day. And we celebrate, God, the harvest in advance. We are not living in famine. We are not living in fear. We are living in unprecedented harvest. Thank you, God. You are the source of that. It comes from you, and we believe in this moment that we have received it now, and so it is, and so we are.